November 22nd, 2023. It's 2:30 p.m. We're starting a little bit late. This is a work session regarding AO 2023-90, amending AMC 3.20.140, Office of Equity and Justice, and AMC 7.10.030, Powers and Duties of Purchasing Officer. Mr. Rivera. Oh, wait, before that, I'm sorry. Let's do introductions. Mr. Martinez.
George Martinez.
Zach Johnson.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant.
Daniel Boland.
Felix Rivera.
On the phone, I believe we have Mr. Salt,
Oh, nice.
Mr. Schultz here.
Mr. Cross.
Mr. Cross here, thank you.
Thank you. In the administration, go ahead and introduce yourself across the way.
Uluwal Jr. Amavai.
Chief Equity Officer. So we need you to speak into a mic, so.
Thank you.
And then push the button to turn it green. There you go.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. I'm Erica Berry. I'm the director of the Office of Equal Opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm Megan Berger, an assistant municipal attorney with the municipality of Anchorage.
I'm Mia Costello, the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Mayor's Office.
Kent Colhayes, Municipal Manager.
All right.
We also have Assembly Council, Legislative Council, Gates and Hurt. Now, Mr. Rivera.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for giving us some time to present on this ordinance. So AO 2023-90 is up for a public hearing and vote at our upcoming meeting on September 26th. This ordinance really deals with three key areas. One, collection of baseline data and metrics. Two, language access. And three, the Women and Minority-Owned Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. Initially, this ordinance was only going to address language access issues, but after more thinking, the sponsors really wanted to put a package together that really addressed some basic equity issues across the municipality. So let's get into it. Next slide, please.
All right. Hey, everybody. And I'm going to take us on the this slide here. We'll walk through a few slides, and then Phyllis and I will go back and forth, and we'll open it up to questions and discussion later on. So this slide describes the creation of the Office of Equity and Justice. It was a result of AO 2020-79. The S version, as amended, created the position of the Chief Equity Officer. The role coordinates across the Mayor's Office, the Assembly, and community partners to, one, ensure that equity is centered within municipal policies and procedures. Two, focus on eliminating inequities to increase the well-being and success for all residents. Next slide, please. The responsibilities of the Chief Equity Officer are the Chief Equity Officer is charged to, quote, actively monitor equity. Quote, establish baseline equity data, targets, benchmarks in collaboration with partners, and establish goals and initiatives to make progress and process to track outcomes. Quote, collect, evaluate, and analyze indicators and progress benchmarks related to addressing systemic disparities. And the fourth fundamental role that we've identified here is, quote, develop and coordinate reports and supporting materials to be presented to the mayor and assembly for information or action. Next slide, please. So how does this ordinance address those issues? Well, this ordinance would move to require semi-annual reporting to the mayor and to the assembly to provide the baseline data, benchmarks, and the progress toward addressing systemic disparities that have been identified across these categories of educational opportunities and outcomes, physical and mental wellness and access to resources, economic opportunities and outcomes, and access and provision of municipal services. Next slide, please. Fundamentally, the role of Chief Equity Officer was developed to help make systemic progress and spur change. So if we are going to make systemic progress and spur change, then we must have a sense of baseline data and metrics, and a core and basic function of the role of the Chief Equity Officer. Next slide, please.
All right, so on to language access. So Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 requires the municipality as a recipient of federal funds to ensure that we are providing access to persons with limited English proficiency. Executive Order 13166 helps to enact these provisions through guidance from federal departments on how we achieve that requirement. And part of that guidance is making sure that we have language access plans. On top of making sure that we are compliant as a recipient, Title VI and the executive order requires us to make sure that our contractors who are recipients of federal funds also comply with these provisions. So all of the millions of federal dollars through CARES and ARPA funds that went out the door over the last few years, those recipients needed to comply with these provisions to provide language access. But who is actually responsible for making sure this work actually gets done? Next slide, please. So this ordinance splits the responsibility in two. Internally, this ordinance envisions OEO as being the responsible party to conduct annual reviews of all departmental language access plans. Externally, the ordinance points to the purchasing director to make sure contractors are in compliance. Next slide, please. So here's the bottom line. Language access is already envisioned in and enshrined in municipal policy. There's been a lot of talk about municipal-wide P&Ps recently. Well, there already exists a municipal-wide P&P regarding language access. But even though that P&P exists, there are gaps in how we make ourselves accountable to meeting this federal requirement. This ordinance remedies that situation. Next slide, please.
Women and minority-owned business and disadvantaged business enterprise. This is called the WMBE programs, and DBEs, disadvantaged business enterprises, are for-profit small businesses where socially and historically disadvantaged individuals own at least 51% interest and also control management and daily operations. African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asian Pacific, and subcontinent Asian Americans and women are presumed to be socially and economically disadvantaged. Purpose of the DBE program is to ensure that those who qualify have the opportunity to participate in contracts with the U.S. DOT or their recipients, the MOA, Municipality of Anchorage, or our contractors who receive federal funds. Next slide, please. Now, how does this ordinance address WDBEs? This ordinance will make the Chief Equity Officer responsible for ensuring that OEO is compliant with DBE regulations. It also would direct the purchasing director to be responsible for ensuring that applicable contractors are complying with DBE regulations. Next slide, please. Yes.
Can we go back to the previous slide? I just want to understand here. So they both are addressing the WDBE issues. The first one, the Chief Equity Officer under the ordinance, is ensuring compliance. And the second one is, it seems like they're kind of parallel. And so is it that the purchasing director is ensuring compliance, or is like making the contractors perform their due diligence, right? So I think there's a slight difference between ensuring compliance and making the contractors do their work.
Yeah,
Good point,
thanks,
Chris.
Mr. Chair. That's a good question. I think it'll be part of the discussion we have a little bit later on. But if you look at the ordinance, it really, and sorry, I just need to pull it up really quick. Specifically when it comes to the purchasing director, their job is primarily to, and I just want to use the exact language, to maintain the log of all municipal contractors who are awarded or certified WDBE businesses. So that is the role that this ordinance envisions for the purchasing director. So they maintain the log of all the contracts, since purchasing director deals with those contracts. And then the actual enforcement of WDBE program has historically lived in OEO. And so that this ordinance really doesn't envision so much a change of who's responsible for the program itself.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Next slide. So the WDBE is another avenue for us to advance equity and compliance of those federal regulations, should be monitored by the relevant municipal agencies. Next slide, please.
All right. So before we close, I just wanted to cover couple things. So first, sort of what's the larger vision here? Why are we bothering with these issues? For the sponsors, this ordinance is an important next step to ensuring that we are compliant and accountable with federal regulations which impact the daily lives of our residents. I can't speak for others, but I know that I have gotten many complaints over the years about the lack of language access in our community. It exists, from municipal apartments to organizations that we help to fund. This is a real issue in our community that is preventing hardworking, innovative entrepreneurs, preventing them from living up to their full potential. And something like language access should not prevent that. And really, all three parts of this ordinance go back to the entire reason that the Chief Equity Officer position was created in the first place, which was to eliminate inequities and increase the well-being and success for all residents. Second, the sponsors are workshopping a possible S version with 3 changes to the ordinance. We haven't had a chance to finalize them, so just take what I'm going to be sharing with a grain of salt. The first change is just fixing a few scrivener's errors in the ordinance. The second change adds the responsibility of getting the affirmative action plan to the assembly to the OEO director. This work's actually already being done in terms of communicating that the affirmative action plan is done, but there's no accountability for this in code. And that lack of accountability has led us to not get affirmative action plan updates in the past. There were, in the not too distant past, several years where we did not get affirmative action plan updates as we should have. The final change adds another accountability measure under the purchasing director, ensuring compliance of Anchorage Municipal Code 7.50.050, equal employment opportunity requirements for contractors. The 2 substantive changes really fit in squarely with the intent of this ordinance, which is all about how we make ourselves accountable to meeting a lot of the measures in our code and federal requirements to enhance equity in our community. And we're happy to have a discussion on other possible changes to the ordinance and consider including them in the S version that's already in the works. I know that there are some folks who have concerns about whether some things should be put under purchasing or under OEO. Happy to have those discussions. But in my opinion, none of these concerns that I have heard can't be addressed by the September 26th meeting. We can get it all done by then. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you all. And I think we're going to be hearing next from the administration and then going into discussion.
All right. Who's up? Please state your name and you'll have the floor.
This is Megan Berger, Assistant Municipal Attorney with the Municipality of Anchorage. Thank you for allowing me to come here today. I think some concerns that the administration have that I believe that Mr. Rivera mentioned are, to start with under Chapter 7, the assembly or the proposed revisions to Chapter 7. We believe these monitoring requirements do belong more appropriately within the Office of Equal Opportunity Director. So it sounds like that, we already have started those discussions to revise the ordinance, the proposed ordinance accordingly. So we are happy to continue to work with the Assembly to address some of those concerns about transferring some of those duties to the Office of Equal Opportunity, where we think it's more appropriate. That's where they live. The office is already doing a lot of those things already. And as far as some of the changes to Chapter 3, We believe that this office of the Chief Equity Officer properly reports to the mayor's office. Once again, a lot of this information that is being requested is something that's already getting compiled. We feel like that this ordinance it's basically unnecessary. It's somewhat duplicative over the duties that this office is already tasked with. And so we talked internally about our willingness to share the information that these offices are already doing, or sharing reports that these offices are already producing with the assembly, if that's a concern. And I thought it would be helpful as well to have, some of the folks here kind of explain some of the background about some of the work that they already do, because it's probably something that's, there's a lot of work that this office does that's along the lines of what this ordinance is proposing. And so we're just trying to avoid any type of duplication or unnecessary efforts. So if we can have some background about some of the work that your office does that this ordinance is speaking to, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
I will just jump in and say I disagree with one statement that you made, as that this office properly reports to the mayor. I would say that this office certainly is subject to hiring and firing at the will of the mayor, but this assembly has the authority to request by resolution or code whatever reports it wants from the departments and their various structures. And so I think maybe that's a finer detail we can talk about later. And if we need to figure out code changes to make that explicitly clear, we can. But generally speaking, I agree with everything you said. We should be efficient with our resources. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to take a moment of a brief bit of exception with what I feel was a tone of adversarial tone, which I think is unnecessary. I think this is an exciting advancement in a position that was created 4 years ago. Equity takes work. This is not pie in the sky. And let me put a finer point on that. I remember working with the OEO director when I was a special assistant to the mayor, because one of my focus areas was economic development. And I really wanted to get into procurement and understand what we were doing with procurement. The reality was we were so far out of compliance that it took dedicated work and hours of labor time from the department at that time to actually get us more in compliance. So equity takes work on its face. I just wanted to be real clear about that. If in practice, I would say, if in practice, the reporting that we are identifying that is going to help this assembly help the municipality drive the equity that we'd like to see, if in practice it was happening, I would love to have inherited that. Then we may be talking about, we love these reports, let us continue to do this and let us lock it in so it's not optional. I don't think that we're talking about that at this point. I think we're a step even further removed, which is, oh, that's nice that there are some reports coming. Wouldn't it be great for the assembly to have a regular reporting of those particular things that help us determine whether or not we are moving in that direction, help to set the guidelines for the equity outcomes that we want? And so it really is a fundamental question of, this is a body of work that right now we think is right to move forward, not from the negative, but from the positive perspective, right? And from that vantage point, if in practice we were receiving the reports that people said that now are available, I would love to make sure that they are not optional anymore, that we actually do have those data points that help us have better policy driving the equity outcomes and language access that we want and we need.
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Berger.
Just a quick response. I didn't mean to sound adversarial, so I apologize if that's how I came across. That was not my intention at all. And you mentioned the reporting. I think I forgot to mention that, this office, both of these offices are subject to reviews by various federal agencies, including like a triennial review that's conducted by the Federal Transit Administration. They just recently completed that review, and the federal government basically found no problems with the OEO administration of these programs that are federally required in order to receive federal funding. I understand that in the past that has not always been the case. I started working for the city in 2018. I believe that there were some problems right around that time, maybe sometime before I got hired as well, where I believe the municipality did lose some federal funding because it wasn't in strict compliance with some of these federal requirements. But I believe that a lot of improvements have been made recently. And there are, there's a lot of federal audits that are being conducted with the municipalities' administrations of these programs. So I forgot to mention that specifically. So thank you.
Right. So we'll take Ms. Braga in the queue and then we'll go back and let the administration make their presentation.
So I just was hoping that someone could clear up for me, like when you look at language access plan, Welcoming Anchorage language access plan, Solid Waste Services language access plan, Anchorage Public Library language access plan. The whole page is all these agencies seem to have a language access plan. Is the feeling that those aren't being adhered to, or are they just not being reported correctly? And then I just wanted to do a side note. Why I do think it's important that we are making sure that people that speak different languages have the access and help they need. We had a presentation about Windows at our house, and one of his slides was, all our employees speak English. I'm like, excuse me? It was just so weird that would be like a selling point. So I thought, not very friendly.
Ms. Rivera.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ms. Braga. So I guess 2 points. One, I am not 100% certain that all departments actually have language access plans. So that's one. And then two is, even if departments do have language access plans, it is not a feeling that there are gaps or issues with language access. It is a reality. It is a concrete truth and fact that there are issues with language access in the municipality. And I'm going to invite some folks who are in the audience to please send us those examples. We need them. You're hearing it now. We need those examples. And I'm actually looking right now at someone. So please send us those examples because it is a reality. I had a conversation with someone earlier this week where she was talking to me about language access issues at APD, language access issues at the DMV. So it is something that happens all the time.
Tie it a little more close to home. Our own elections. We have limited opportunity for people who don't speak English to have a ballot in a language that they understand. And so not even looking across the breach into the executive branch of our government, this is a conversation that the whole government needs to see all sides, because there are just areas where we are not sufficient. In fact, we have a purchase coming forward for voting modules that are politically unpopular in some circles because of the name of the manufacturer, but they make it possible for people who can't see to vote secretly. And so anyhow, we're working on this in all manner of ways. This is a shared problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think coming from the background of ASD and what a fabulous job they do, it's just kind of hard to believe that we would have issues. And also, I was a contact tracer for COVID-19, and they had a language access, and I mean that was a little temporary gig. So just thanks for clearing that up.
They had so much money.
Just to respond as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. To Member Braga, and this also really is describing that there's now a responsibility for the annual review of said language access plans, with the hope that we're talking about execution fundamentally, right? So that rub between, we got a plan, who has a plan, where do they live, how often are they reviewed, to make sure that they're still relevant and being executed in a way that is driving the outcomes that we want. So I think that's what we're focused on in this. Thank you for the question.
I think that exhausts my cue for the moment, and now we'll let you have the floor.
Junior Amavai, Chief Equity Officer. At this time, I want to give the floor to Erica. She will talk about the language access that we have here at the city, the audit that we have done last year, and that we look to continue to do with the city to make sure that all the language access programs that we have in the city are accessible to all municipal employees and also individuals within the community. So Erica is going to go through a little report that she did with the language access, and I'll give her the floor now.
Hello.
Ms. Berry, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Erica Berry. I have a lot of paperwork in front of me, and I think we had suggested at one point to get it all copied and get copies to everyone. So I have been working at the municipality since 2014. I was originally the DBE officer investigator, and last year became the OEO director. And so I have a lot that I can speak on over the last 9 years in this office. And I am very happy that this stuff is being brought up, because I can say in 9 years, no one, I feel, and I know that everyone can kind of agree with this, is that no one really knows what the OEO office does. No one really knows what the DBE program is. No one is familiar with, I would probably say 90% of the things that my office does, which is fine. I'm in there by myself right now, so I don't have really any help. But I do want to say, since I have been in this office, we have not been in compliance at all. And I will say that because if my office is not in compliance, the Muni would lose its federal funding, which everyone would know about. We would lose our DOT funding, which is our federal highway, our federal aviation projects, and our federal transit projects. Like I said, I have a lot of documentation, so I'm sorry. I do have my dashboards from the FAA, which shows all of my DBE Part 26 achievement reports that are submitted to the FAA every December 1st, have been accepted and in green, as well as our DBE goals, which have been approved. Those are 3-year program plans, as well as our DBE Part 26 programs. And through our FTA program, we have 2 reports a year, one in June 1st and one December 1st, which have all been approved by our federal civil rights agents. And additionally, we have every couple of years we do like I said, I've been working in this for 9 years. And if you are not familiar with it, it is a lot. My office is hiring, and it is very difficult to find anyone interested in this type of work, because it is very in-depth, and you really have to be passionate about helping minority, women-owned businesses, small businesses. And I can say I also have printed out a sheet since I've been director for the last 2 years of all of the outreach that we've done. We've held Women Business History Month, Black Business Month. We had a Samoan History Month event. We have an upcoming Hispanic Heritage Month event. And I'm saying all that to say that we, as an office of one, I have been trying to get out there and speak to all these small businesses. Sometimes at our events, we only have 3 or 4 people. They're businesses that are just starting out. They want to know about contracting at the city, but we want to just direct them basically in the right direction where to go. That's what I don't know if anyone was there a couple years ago, and even last year we held an event upstairs in the mayor's conference room. It was called How to Do Business with the Muni. We found people didn't even know how to get business licenses to work at the city. They didn't know where to look for procurements. They didn't know what the purchasing department even was. And so that has kind of been my goal since here. Like I said, I have printouts for all of you of all the events that we've been doing, work sessions we've been sitting in, trying to get out in the community. But also I do want to say, and I know that a lot of that is up for question, is the code and whatnot around the OEO office has changed a lot over the years. But my office has a number of duties besides the DBE program, besides civil rights. We also are responsible for harassment, sexual harassment training at the municipality, taking informal complaints, and many other things. There is a long list. But we did recently, we undergo, because we receive federal DOT funds, that's Department of Transportation, we have to undergo every couple of years. It's called a triennial review. It is basically a federal audit. It takes anywhere between, I would say the last one took about 9.5 months. This last one that was virtual, it actually just ended in August. But usually our federal civil rights agents would come on the 8th floor, they meet with the mayor, they go through procurement, they go through purchasing, they go through OEO, they go through EEO, and make sure that we're following all the right regulations when it comes to government contracting. And I have all that information here. I didn't bring the whole triennial review document because it's hundreds of pages, but we did recently, the DBE office did just go through the triennial review, and we had 0 findings this time around, which is very huge given the office being one person. We have to monitor things like down to the dollar that is going to disadvantaged business enterprises. And I do want to just make a quick correction, Felix, and I'm not trying to come after anyone, but we do not use the term DBE anymore. It is now just DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise. I know you told me to explain that because a lot of people don't know all these acronyms. So it's basically to become a certified DBE, you have to go through the state of Alaska. So our office does not do that, but we do have a DBE program here where we try to get as many DBEs on our municipal federally funded projects that we can. And I'm sorry, I told you it's a lot. And then also, additionally, we have to submit a DBE program every 3 years. Last year, when I was the acting director, I was notified by our FAA civil rights agent that our DBE program had a lot of errors and that had to be updated and changed. And I do have the supporting documentation that those corrections have been made and that we are now in compliance. Our DBE program was accepted by our FAA civil rights agent. And now I can talk a little bit about the language access, specifically to my section under the Section 2, Office of Equal Opportunity Director. So last year, Junior and I started discussing, I would say early last year when I became the acting director, who was the language access person for the municipality. It previously used to be someone in the mayor's office under Mayor Berkowitz's administration. She obviously is no longer here. So as Felix said, there was a PMP about the language access, and we basically were like, what's going on with this? Is anyone monitoring it? So I kind of just started taking the reins on it because I know that it needs to be done. I'm sure I've talked with our legal team. I know that we have a lot of room for improvement to make sure that we are doing everything that we need to be doing. But so starting back when Junior and I started discussing this back in September, October, I started sending, which I have copies of, emails to all directors regarding what you were looking at, the language access program plans for each department that is required to have one, sending them emails, asking them to make sure that their plans are updated. We printed off over 2,000 of the language access posters and made sure that they are posted specifically over at APD, all the offsite buildings. And we called and spoke with someone from departments to make sure that they knew of the program. That was a lot of the issue, was that this program was created, I don't know, Felix, if you know, was it 2018 or when, I forgot what her name was. I apologize.
Amy, the language
Yes,
access.
Amy,
Party.
yes.
I'm gonna
Amy
jump in for a
Kaufman.
minute.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in for a minute. I had a question for Mr. Martinez.
Sorry.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Oh.
I'm waiting.
Okay, never mind. I misunderstood. Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. So I know that she was kind of the head of all this. Like I said, when I was in that office, I would say we had our own language access plan, but we did not really have involvement in administering it to the municipality. So I kind of just was sending emails to directors, making sure that if they haven't looked at their language access plan, that they looked into the requirements of it, that they made sure it was updated. Additionally, we have a form for departments. I know of 2 departments that I regularly get their forms when they use their language access services. So the language access program that we have right now is through procurement. It is a 5-year, it was a 5-year contract. And the issue that we're trying to work through now is that every department, when it was created in 2018, was given its own personal ID code with a password. Obviously, in 5+ years, there's been a lot of changeover. So people that knew their department's code do not know their department's code anymore. But each department does have their own personalized language access code. The posters, they can call and they can request for in writing language services or telephonic language access services. Like I said, we do receive and I'm not sure how they got directed to me, but I do receive the reports. There are a couple departments, when they utilize the language access program, they just fill out this quick form and it shoots it to me that the type of service and language that was used. And so last year, when we kind of started discussing this, I basically did a quote unquote audit at the municipality. This was given to Mayor Bronson on December 21st, 2022. And this was, like I said, I can give everyone copies of this because I did not make enough. I apologize. Basically, that we were notifying everyone of the municipality's language access requirements. We encouraged them to read the policy and procedure, follow up with the federal guidelines, and we ensured that every department had their language access posters accessible, not only to municipal workers, but also to people from the public that would come in and utilize municipal departments that would need those services. So.
Right. I have a couple of people in the queue. Mr. Martinez, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for highlighting for me why we need code. And it's interesting because my disposition is like we should go further and somehow think of even deeper opportunities to understand how we move the equity agenda or needle forward, right? But I think we're taking really good proactive steps. Things here, when you identified the language plans, right?
Mhm.
The language access plans, and you also identified the gaps that you saw, things that you worked on, and you identified also the procurement question of like how to do business with the municipality.
Right.
Let me bring a little historical perspective on that. I drove that first conversation as the special assistant to the mayor with purchasing director Ron Haddon at the time. And so we drove that conversation because we wanted to open up that discussion both by what do we have on the books, but then also what is the agenda that the municipality sees with respect to proactive engagement in that space. So we were early starting. Now, if we're still just doing outreach, I would say we're behind. And I would say that we need to now think about what are the things in terms of real public goals that we need to get toward to drive outcomes. And I don't think we address that in this particular ordinance. I think we're addressing a foundation of expectations that lead us into a space where we can see real measurable outcomes. But I just wanted to identify that because I respect the outreach work.
Right.
I really do. I was a part of that early on.
Right.
And I also was the wing person to Ms. Kaufman.
Right.
From the administration. So we went to all the departments and educated folks. So here we are with X amount of years later, and there's not a clear public sense that both things are in place and they're functioning. There is a gap to the public's awareness of what is happening because we don't see the outcomes yet. So there's some discrepancy with that space. And I think this really helps to identify why what we're doing is meaningful to drive a little forward, because there seems to be some optionality in the ecosystem with respect to what we get to know as the assembly, which seems like it's totally out of whack. And it also, there seems to be optionality with respect to the role of the chief equity officer. Because as I think about this, and I hear information like where we're working on, things that we're working on, I'm interested in what is the established baseline equity data targets benchmark? And does that exist at all? And so I think it's important that we recognize that we are trying to advance a more public understanding of what we could achieve when we focus on the equity question in our community. And that's really why the role of the chief equity officer was created in an office of equity and justice. Right? So it seems substantial. And so when it talks about systemic disparities, I should be able to now ask, just all things being equal, where's the baseline equity data and what are the substantial systemic disparities that we've addressed last year that we're focusing on this year? And they cannot be that we're still doing outreach for procurement, because I started that before there was an office of this with the hope that at some point there would be an office created that would drive deeply into understanding how to move through disparity into equity, right? And so I just wanted to really frame that, because I think you've really highlighted why it's important that we put a little more codification into this direction of this role, because quite honestly, if you all were doing the greatest job ever, I'd still want to make sure it didn't change with the new administration. And if you're not doing the greatest job ever, I'd want to make sure you have an opportunity to get toward where we need to head, right? And so codification, I think, helps us establish the pathway forward. And so I just would want to communicate that to my colleagues as well, that this was really that intention of making sure we have a strong codified framework that we can now rely on and have a more robust public engagement process to drive the outcomes we think we need. Thank you, Chair.
Was there a question, or is that just kind of a?
That was
Okay,
a
thank
question.
you.
I don't think that
That's fine.
unless you have baseline equity data, that was a question. And unless you have the systemic disparities that you've been working on with respect to the baseline equity data that are in the job description, responsibilities, that would be the only question.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thanks. Since we're getting close-ish to the end of our time, I'll go ahead and just make a final comment here, hopefully final. I just want to thank the administration for all of that information and the accounting of the necessary work that is being done. I really appreciate that. I do want to, though, take a little bit of umbrage with a phrase that I heard someone use about this ordinance. And it was, quote, unquote, unnecessary efforts of this ordinance. I do not think, and that is not the frame of mind that I hope the administration would have about this work. All of this work is necessary. All of this work is critical. It is important for the way that we provide services to the residents of the municipality of Anchorage. There's nothing that's unnecessary about accountability and making sure that we know who in this large organization is responsible for ensuring that language access is being administered properly. There's nothing unnecessary about making sure that we know who is responsible for making sure that our DBE program is complying with federal law. There's nothing unnecessary about knowing who is the responsible party to collect the baseline equity data that we know that we need. There's nothing unnecessary about the transparency of all of this. I have heard a lot of really great information today. Where's the transparency? How come none of this information is getting to the assembly? How come none of this information is getting to the public? There's nothing unnecessary about transparency. And there's nothing unnecessary about enshrining the practice of equity into our municipal code. And so all of these efforts, I would argue, are absolutely necessary. I agree with Mr. Martinez. This is just the start. This is not the end. And I would really hope that the administration would take that point of view for the efforts in this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Amabai.
Jerome Vai, Chief Equity Officer. Just want to thank you, Martinez, for your words, and also Rivera. I just want to recognize Erica. The work that she has done is very exceptional when it comes to language access. I think the difference that we're talking about with equity and the work that she's been doing is that in previous administrations and directors, we haven't been compliant. And underneath Erica, we are. And so that kind of proves to some of the work that she's been doing, some of the outreach efforts within the community with resources and accessibility, it has put our city in compliance federally, not only with language access, but also the other things she talked about federally. So I just want to recognize Erica and the work that you're doing there, and also with the assembly working with us. When I first got on board, I created the Listening Tour Initiative, where I meet with not only the assembly members, the mayor, but also community members. And I learned about these different challenges, barriers that are in. Martinez, you sat one of those. Most of the assembly members here actually did that with me. So I appreciate all the feedback that we get from the assembly and also community members. But also want to just highlight Erica and the work that she has done within the last year and a half as the director of OEO to be able to get us compliant in all the areas that are in language access, DBE, the programs that she oversees. So the work that she has done so far for the city has been exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brawley.
Thank you. And thanks to my colleagues that work on this ordinance. I guess I want to step back a little bit. And while we have you here, Junior. So what I hear is the two things are true. One is that we are compliant with the federal reporting that we need to do. Or I should say that's what's been asserted. And I'm not saying that it's not true, but just, I haven't seen it myself, so I can't say. But it's also true that the experience of many people in this city, and it's been true for a long time. I mean, and probably back, since before the city was founded, is that people don't have an equal experience in this city. And that can be working with the municipality. It can certainly be with interacting in the broader community. But I'm just curious, so getting beyond just the kind of compliance lens, how do we start to change that? Because I think that it's a culture change and it's a policy change. It's kind of all the things that I think we want to see happen. So I'm curious, Mr. Amave, in your work so far, kind of what you see those barriers are within the municipality, and then how do we get to where we actually want to go beyond kind of focusing on federal compliance?
Are you referring to the DBE program or language access?
I guess it's really both, and then I think it's also just the fact that people don't feel like they're treated equally in the city or by the city, and I think what we've heard is there's a lot of examples of that, and I'm not pointing out specific people or specific agencies. I think that's just been true for a long time.
Thank you. Well, like I mentioned earlier, one of the first things that I created, initiative that I created when I first got into office, is be able to hear those voices, which was the listening tour that I had with assembly members and also community members, with the mayor, executive team, and listen about the different barriers that are here in the city. After I hear those different inputs from different groups, now I have the information to be able to work with Erica, to be able to work with different departments within the city to be able to address those barriers and also resources that we can put out for individuals, which is why I highlight the work that she's doing. The outreach work that Martinez talked about earlier, that's still a big deal. Outreach is still a huge thing, whether it was in the past administrations, it's still a big thing in current administration. Like you mentioned, everybody has a different story. So not everyone's story is the same. So this is why it's important to be able to go out, listen, have outreach efforts, have these different resources available and accessible within the city. And Erica has done a great job within the language access to be able to get us compliant within the city, but also with the DBE program. We're also compliant there federally. So being able to get that information from community members, also government official, being able to bridge that gap with the feedback that we get, and then what can we do within our departments to be able to bridge that gap? Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess just to reiterate, what are some of the barriers? Because I heard you did the listening, and then kind of what are you seeing broadly within the city?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because there's a lot of barriers. Think about equity. It isn't just one or two or four different categories. It's everything in everyone's life. It's every aspect, but everyone has a different story. So within equity that I've been able to find out here in Anchorage, Alaska, everyone's dealing with the workforce. Everyone's dealing with education barriers. Everyone's dealing with work, like the different things that we experience here in Anchorage, obviously is not the same in the lower 48. So Anchorage is a lot different as far as the city compared to Los Angeles or a city in the lower 48. That's why it's important we hear the voices here locally in Anchorage so that we can figure out the barriers that we have here. Once I figure that out, then I can work with the municipal resources and also local resources to be able to bridge that gap, which is why Erica has been done a great job after I met with Erica last year about getting on top of the language access and how we can get those resources out and make it more available and also be compliant, which now you've learned from Erica's work. She can provide this information to you. She has all the documents need to. The city has been compliant within the previous administration. Underneath Erica's helm, she is now compliant. Now, that's just one piece about it. So the work that she's been able to do, I just want to recognize that today. But also, we still got a lot more work to do, like Martinez mentioned. And this is why this position was created, to be able to bridge those gaps within local government resources, whether we work with school district, nonprofits, private sector. This is the reason why Chief Equity Officer is in this position. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. I wanted to chime in and piggyback off something that you said, Mr. Martinez, but because I can't really speak to Junior's role specifically, but I can speak to what the OEO office does in regards to, you know, helping small businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and kind of like what you said. I mean, I'm very excited to be here because, as I said, been here for 9 years. You don't know how many people I meet that are like, well, what is DBE? What is the OEO office? And really what I've found is I've been going to all these events, you know, hosted at the Emoja, with the Small Business Administration, the Women's Business Administration. People have no idea about our office, and it is a very small office. But what I have found is from going out in the community is there's so many. So the DBE program is for federally funded contracts. I mean, you have to be a very established business, business license, you know, licensed and bonded. Usually it's construction, it's, you know, highway, FTA, transit, or FAA. And so in going out, I actually was at the Million Cups on Wednesday, and I'll be there again this coming Wednesday, which is an entrepreneur event for local entrepreneurs at the Emoja Co-working Center. And what I've been going there is when I first started doing a lot of outreach, because I will say in my previous role, I was all the compliance, you know, in the office. And I would go to all these events and I'm like, you know, we have all this federal money, blah, blah, blah. Well, the majority of these people that are starting businesses, you know, do not have a $50,000 bond to become a subcontractor to Granite Construction, X, Y, and Z. And so I was like, I really feel like I'm going out there, you know, telling people I can help them get government money, and I really can't. And so what I've been working with Jasmine Smith at the Emoja Co-working Center is we're really trying to now, like I said, I'm sorry, this is focused towards minority and women businesses because I do the business aspect, but we are working on trying to create a program at the municipality that is for minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses to get in on some of the municipal contracts versus the federal contracts. Because, like I said, to become a DBE, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot you have to go through the state. The municipality, does not even do that. And so, you know, when last month when we were at the Black History Month event that was over at the airport, there was probably over 30 businesses that we were like, you know, this is the services I provide. How can you help me? And I get very discouraged being like, I can't help you, and referring them to other places. And so now we're like, you know, the Muni has so much money, whether it's cleaning, you know, whether it's cleaning up garbage, parks and rec, any kind of services like that. You know, there's obviously a lot of food vendors that are looking to where they can get in on some money, really any kind of niche, you name it. And so now we're kind of looking at, there's so much municipal money, how we can get these small businesses working on these. So essentially a smaller program for the municipality. We are kind of looking into the Alaska statutes to see if that kind of prohibits us doing set asides and whatnot on contracting. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But like I said, I share your excitement and I'm happy to be here. And like I said, speak about it. And I'm very happy to answer any questions, you know, about any of the business or the type of work that we're trying to do.
So we have approximately 5 minutes left if we give ourselves an hour from our late start. And I have 2 people left in the queue. Mr. Walland.
Thank you. You know, I'll just say this has been very interesting to hear about the work that you both are doing. I think you have a lot of fodder there for a memo that you could submit to the assembly. And really, that's what we want to know, right? It's like, what is the great work that you're doing? What are you learning from the community? And I appreciated, Junior, you sharing with us that you did that listening tour, and that gave you information to work with the various departments and utilize municipal resources. And I think that that's the same approach that would be helpful with the assembly, because at the end of the day, you know, we are policymakers, we're the legislative body, and we also have the purse strings. And so how can we support, you know, with that listening tour? You know, I don't know, did you make a report of like the things that you learned on that listening tour? Because that would be something that I think would be really instructive for us. If you said, this was Junior's listening tour, and I met with all these different, you know, local businesses or just, you know, folks in the community or churches or whoever you met with. I would love to learn about that and get some of your takeaways. Thanks.
I can provide you that information. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you all to the colleagues for your thoughtfulness, for being here. Thank you to the administration for being here. To the upper administration, we got to get to work. So send the message. This is not an adversarial situation. This is we have to get to work. Erica, I appreciate the work that you've done. I created a framework for what a municipal DBE program would do during that time. So there's movement in that particular area. I did want to highlight that. Remember, Brawley, your question was spot on to me. Because beyond those areas, we need to know what's happening, what barriers we can help to address, and we need to communicate those things to the public. So I would always say, if you can't produce a report after the work, then it's hard to quantify how much work you really did. All right? And that's not to say that work wasn't done, but it's to say that being able to bring a deliverable back to say, what were those particular barriers? Top 3 indicators. Or let's go to how this ordinance addresses the semi-annual reporting across educational opportunities and outcomes. Not a DBE question, and not necessarily a language access question. Physical and mental wellness and access to resources. Baseline data to even say, where are we with our health of our community? That's not a DBE question. Economic opportunities and access to the provision of municipal services. So it's more expansive with respect to what we hope that we can start to have some codification so that it's not, with all respect, and I do respect you, Junior, a lot, it's not just, oh, I can get you that information, right? It really is more about this, the municipality having reliance from the administrative and from the executive and the legislative branch on the role of chief equity officer to inform and help us come alongside the substantive changes in policy that are going to drive the outcomes. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks. And I'm going to close this off just by pointing out that the Office of Equity and Justice was created in August of 2020, which is 3 years and 1 month ago. The initial appointment to that position was in April of 2021, and then there was a legal conflict and a change to the hiring and who serves at whose pleasure in that year. So now we are effectively 2 years and 5 months into having an operating Office of Equity and Justice. This is the first time the Assembly has had an opportunity to meet and discuss with the Chief Equity Officer these issues. And so for the first time, it is what it is. Here we are. Welcome. And now the question is, where do we go from here to make it more closely aligned with what the code establishes the position to be? And one thing that we heard that kind of causes me a little bit of concern is that there were periods of time in our history when we were out of compliance with the federal rules on the DBE issues. And so one report I would like in soon is a report on the times and substance of when we were out of compliance. So a timeline and the substance of when. And I would like us to understand those details, and then we can talk about what we did to fix it and where we're going from here. But since it has been put into the record that we were out of compliance, we need to have a legislative briefing on when we were out of compliance and how, because that's an important piece of info.
Yes, I have a question about that.
Sure,
Is
go
that-
ahead.
So out of compliance, I'm sorry, this is my first meeting. So out of compliance, you mean as in the municipality only was federally out of compliance when our funds were taken away, which I believe was 10 years ago from the FTA. When our DBE program was sent back to us, we had, I believe it was 120 working days to have it fixed and sent back.
So however you want to frame that report with enough detail for us to understand, since you say it was 10 years ago, the last 10 years of history on our compliance in detail. If it was, no, we weren't federally out of compliance, didn't trigger a rescission of funds or threat of rescission, but it was along that path, that's important information for us to have.
Okay.
So we can understand our sufficiencies and our deficiencies. In historic context is very helpful. So, and thank you all, everybody. We are at the end of our time. And I think from here, I will adjourn and say, please, everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Well, you got it for a minute.